Okay, in your opinion, do you think communities, your communities, are placing enough value and respect for artists and art?
I think, definitely in America we have this issue. I don't know if you all watch like Hollywood movies or news or things that come out of America. Often it's not coming from our voices. Often it's coming from a very structured corporate narrative to paint a picture of what's happening and what people are like and what people are doing. So I think, we have some work to do, personally.
I think I would like to echo the same sentiments, that there is a valuing of what we have locally, but there's still a challenge in terms of the connections, in terms of the engagement with leadership, in terms of community level, and even at national level. So I guess it's still that idea of how do we continue to having this dialogue in terms of how do we value our art, how do we value our artists, how do we value the spaces that we actually need to create art from. And I'm really certain that quite recently that at Zimbabwe, as in direction, their houses were destroyed and they were pushed away from the land that they occupied for a long time. And I think just getting to a space where people understand that actually having an artist occupying a space, whether it's a building, whether it's a piece of land, is actually a good thing. Because artists, when they come into a space, they value things. They value the tools that they've been given to use in order for them to create their work. So if we get to a space where we can actually make people understand that, and then we can get to a really better place in our society, especially here in Zimbabwe. So I don't even know what's happening with that cultural policy. I used to follow in terms of updates on what was happening with that. Because if you have a cultural policy, then you know exactly what are we saying as a nation, what are we doing as a country in terms of whether it's training, whether it's in terms of even trade itself, because from the art, from the work that we create, we can actually gain some sort of economic gain as a country. But if we don't have a blueprint, if we don't have a document that actually articulates what it is that we want to do in terms of our artists, in terms of the work that is being done here, when you look at even the sculptures that were made from whenever up to now in Zimbabwe, 3/4 of them are not here in Zimbabwe. Most of it is in the British Museum, and some of it is somewhere else. But in the whole country, nothing. So and I think it's actually a reflection that we are not following our art, we're not following our artists. Other people are coming in, they're bringing their own ideas and their own value on our art. And if we don't have control over that narrative, then we don't have a proper control in terms of our identity as a nation, because I think art is a huge part of our identity as peoples.
Okay, so I was making a list in my mind. I agree, and we're not going to agree on everything. I promise. We're going to get into it, so it'll be exciting. But I think things work differently in the United States than here, of course. But I think globally, anti-Blackness is a thing, and the idea that what is ours, what is of cultural value to us, is only of value if it can be exploited, if it can be extracted and exploited and created more value for other people. So, it's, yes, there's definitely many levels, nationally, internationally, what gets promoted and why. And I think, bottom line, what is most valued in our culture is what can sell. So it's kind of like, can this art be used to sell these products? And you see it all the time in music and in movies, product. How can these multinational corporations make more money? How can we develop this real estate? How can we paint a different narrative of this space? So, how many people have heard of Detroit, Michigan? Raise your hand, please. Okay. I want you to just shout out some things that you've heard about my beloved hometown. Don't worry, you won't hurt my feelings. Just, what kind of images, what kind of words come to mind when you think about Detroit?
Cars.
Cars, okay.
Eminem.
Oh, okay. we'll put a pin in there. We'll talk about that in a moment. What else?
Rejuvenation, because isn't you started reclaiming buildings, spaces.
So before the rejuvenation, what's there? What's in that space? What do you think about? Any pictures come to mind when you think of Detroit?
Creative employment through art.
Creative employment through art.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. I think you guys are being really nice to me. Thank you. When I go places and I tell people I'm from Detroit, often people are like, I heard it's like a lot of crime there. Isn't it violent? Isn't it, kind of dirty? And, it has like this negative connotation, right? And I think that has been painted over the years for this exact moment, so that we can now have this new narrative of rejuvenation. And corporations are now welcome. We're open for business, and we have saviors, right? And the artists are like making it beautiful for industry, and we're making it beautiful, Whereas before, when we had like Motown, we had a true creative industry that was supported by policy, by the city of Detroit. There was musical, artistic development set aside in the budget so that, artists, and there was infrastructure in the city. There were clubs and places and festivals that were sponsored where all of those famous folks came through and were groomed and got practice and then were helped to go on the road. So, now what we have is more foundations, which are like the way corporations don't pay taxes. So they're like, we put it over here, and then we do great stuff, and then people talk about us, and we're great. So they invest in the arts, and it's very specific to, right now, real estate. How do we get artists into communities to paint murals, do sculptures, do things, and then sadly move the artists out because now no one can afford to live there. And now we have, new buildings, new people, new industries. So, it's all of these things, but definitely policy and right-minded policy about why are we doing, who is the art for? Is it for the people who are here, or are we trying to bring new people and dismiss the people who have been here? So, just putting that out there.
It's interesting that when you spoke about corporates engaging with artists as a tax rebate, or so that they can pay, they don't have to pay taxes. Is it necessarily bad that corporates fund or sponsor art programs or artists?
I say no. That's how I got here. So I gotta be real. Like, I appreciate it, but I think we have to be critical. I think if a corporate sponsorship says you must do this, and you can't question me, or you can't, there's no way for you to actually be free and be creative, then I think it's up to a community of artists to say, no, thank you. That's not fair. But I don't think it's inherently bad.
Mm-hmm. I definitely think that corporate sponsorship is not a bad idea. We should have more of that here in Zimbabwe. But definitely, I think it's just a matter of finding the right balance between being sponsored to create your art and having freedom and room to actually pursue your voice, pursue your creativity. And I think it's very difficult to find that balance. It's not easy. And sometimes you might want to get that corporate job because you really need to pay the rent and you really need to take care of yourself. But at the same time, then how much of a suffering does your artwork go through? Because now you're pandering to certain things. Maybe they're not necessarily telling you not to, and they're not necessarily telling you to create art in a certain way, but you know that you're limited in terms of how critical you can be in your art, especially maybe you're being sponsored by a corporate that is quite narrow-minded in terms of the way they present themselves to the public. But they make profit from us, we consume their products, we consume their services. They should invest in our art. They should invest, because I think art is a true reflection of the human condition. Art is an opportunity for us to find our way to the future. So definitely, yeah.
Absolutely. And I want to just piggyback on that. So we, as an artist community in Detroit, a lot of people know each other. And a lot of people are very supportive of the work that people are making. And it's interdisciplinary. So, you know, filmmakers, poets, like people all kind of like get together and know each other, right? And it's beautiful, like through this exchange program, the CCD, I'm here, I'm able to be at Injalele, and I have, you know, I feel like comrades like Kumbulani and Sharon in the audience that are supporting me, and I've met them in my space, and, you know, it's kind of like this beautiful, continuous building and understanding. And from that point of like strength and community, artists have more power and are able to hold the line and say, you know what you're doing here is not right. We are going to speak about this, or we're all going to decline to be a part of this thing and give you validity for what you're doing, or hey, these are our guidelines. And so we came up with a document called a Cultural Benefits Agreement, and I can send it to you and I can share it. I'm happy to share with everybody. But basically, we noticed that people were coming from other cities with, you know, mainly New York, lots and lots of money, lots and lots of capital. And they want to produce something. They want to do a conference. They want to do a laboratory. They want to do a film festival. They want to do all of these things in Detroit because of this narrative, this rejuvenation, right? And so they're like giving artists tokens, you know, actually just come and perform, and, you know, you can get into our conference for free. Well, no, that's not valuing the people who are here and what people are doing. And it's also tokenizing, you know, so it's kind of like, so we have a Detroit performer, we're in Detroit, we're spending all of this money, doing all of this, but we're not engaging with Detroit. We're not engaging with the actual cultural producers or even the technical folks, you know, they're flying their whole crews in. And it's like, okay, time out. So we had this amazing opportunity with the new museum. They said, hey, we want to do this thing in Detroit. We looked at it, and they had like all of these crumbling buildings and, you know, next city, Detroit. And, you know, all this kind of like evoking that like despair, you know, like that dirty, crime-ridden, we're so bossy because we can go in here and have this laboratory and live in an abandoned building and, you know, urban jungle, like all of these, you know, narratives start coming out. And they reached out to a lot of us, and then basically we said, actually, all of us got together at dinner, 25 artists, and we said we're not going to participate unless these things can be met. And we had to vent first. We had to say, you know what, I'm tired of people coming in here using Detroit as a backdrop. I'm tired of people using all their capital but not helping anybody in Detroit. I'm tired of people taking our ideas and then using them elsewhere and never crediting the artist that they got it from or the writer that they got it from. So we had to vet first. And then we made a list and we said, if any of us are going to participate, you will do this, spend your dollars in the city of Detroit with people of color. And people of color means like all people, Black people, Hispanic people, but people who are usually left out and not thought of to be number one on the vendor list. You are going to pay the artist appropriate to what their fees are. So it's not just a free ticket entry. You are going to acknowledge where you are. You are going to give attribution. So that means if any quotes, any ideas, anything comes out of the workshops, that the artist will make sure that they are in contact and that their name is credited. We will keep relationships with the government officials that you're in contact with, because that's another big thing. People come from outside and they're able to talk to the top officials, whereas the artists who are in the community don't have that access. So, hey, you're gonna keep us in contact. We're gonna have, that doorway that stays open. And you're gonna be transparent about where your money is coming from and where the money is being spent. They didn't really like that so much. I mean, they did more than before, and they kind of used it as a model going forward, but they're like, we have to do this way, this that way, but at least they're thinking, and then they know we're thinking about what benefits our whole community, and not just like me getting my, honorarium on that particular day, and then that's the end of our engagement. So
it's interesting that you spoke about tokenism honorariums. What can be done really, and I think this is especially important for Zimbabwe, that if we say the going rate for maybe a talk like this one is $200 per speaker, but we'll give you a token of maybe $10 for your bus fare. What can be done to ensure that if she says no, you say no, she can say, oh, okay, I'll do it. Because there's always going to be that person who's willing to do it even for less than they are worth. What can be done?
I think it's in two ways. I think it's on the part of the artist to inspire collective agreement. I remember at one time, as a group of poets, we all decided that we were tired of being called and then being told we are being exposed and then you get a $20. And we all sat down and we decided for every performance that we're going to do, as long as it's 10 minutes, you're being paid $150. If someone calls you, you're not going for that job. And I think there were about 8 of us, and every time we would say no. And until up to a point where some people could no longer come back with that idea of, here's the $20, we're exposing you, get the job, But you still have people, because they're also growing in their art, because they're also trying to get to a stage where they are fully recognized, they'll still take on those jobs. And I also think that it also comes to the organizations themselves as well as the companies to actually have a policy or an attitude that what we're going to do is we're going to properly remunerate our artists. And this is something that is very important in our mercy, and we'll always make sure that whatever, whether it's a production or workshop, if we're saying we're paying people, we've decided that this is the going rate. We don't care about what other people are paying other people. We care about how much we are paying the people that we work with.
yeah, it's extremely important to be unified. Whoever your group is, to be unified and to have that agreement and to be like, I want to say honest enough and actually have a sense of community where you can say, hey, look, I really need this now, and needs change, right? So how does the group address that without just kind of disintegrating because people feel undercut? But being able to really hash those things out and figure out, like, as a group, what's what. And then I think, it's okay to say, I'm doing this at a 50% discount because I like you so much. This is my rate, but I'm willing to do this, and that way you've stated your value. And it's consistent with whatever the other group is, and you can say, and don't mention this. And if they do, and if you happen to, just know this is only for you. If you have that relationship with the space or whomever, But I do think, you know, stating our value and being consistent is really important, and it shifts. And there's no possible way, like any of us could actually put a dollar amount on our whole life, right?
Yeah.
So when you come to a space and you're bringing your whole self and you're giving it everything, you know, it's a negotiation in itself. Like, you know, how valuable is this space? Are these people? Is this relationship? Is, you know, all of that, and then you're kind of doing a working, dance or negotiation, because it's impossible. You know, I need 5 mil, 5 minutes, 5 mil.
And I think just to add on that, what would also help is if we had a body that would actually advocate to make sure that artists are properly remunerated. Because I'll also give you an example of a big company decided to have an advert made here in Zimbabwe. They had 22 of the crew brought in from South Africa, and the crew from South Africa were paid this wonderful, amazing amounts, and the local Zimbabwean people were paid this rate that I don't know where they got it from, probably from the clouds, I don't know. But it was such a poor rate, and the disparities, because then people have conversations, they talk, and you're wondering, what is it about us? Because we are highly skilled in these positions that we're actually taking on in this production for the advert. What's so different about me and this South African who's coming in from South Africa and coming to my space to work and being paid more than I'm being paid? But if you don't have a body, if you don't have your government saying, we're going to give you permits to come and work in Zimbabwe and work with Zimbabweans, but we want to make sure that the locals are properly remunerated, then nothing happens. We're constantly going to be exploited and have people come in with the big bucks, spend it on themselves, and then go away.
Can I jump in there real quick though? It still comes back to the artist, and it comes back to being organized. Because very rarely do policies happen without like serious advocating. So having those folks who are most affected being able to write something, to demand something, to bring it to whomever has the power to say, actually we do need this type of policy, you know, waiting for it, I don't think ever happened.
Yeah, I think there has been some advocacy that has been done, especially people from Trust, Josh Nyabimbi, Steve, Chifunyise, and others were involved. But some, I don't know, nothing has actually concretized, because I don't know whether there's a disconnect or disengagement. I don't know.
Oh, or maybe it's because we're going through rejuvenation ourselves. So things are up in the air at the moment. Maybe any last words before we open this conversation to the floor?
I don't have any.
Okay. All right.
It's high time that we really behave like activists as well for our space, even the so-called policies that are in place, so that they can be implemented. It's up to us. And at the same time, the problem that we face is a class issue amongst artists. I work in vulnerable communities, and all the time somebody will ask me, what are you looking for here? And I said, excuse me, I am here because I'm an artist. I'm not supposed to go to certain areas because it's Virginia period. I can go anywhere I like. I grew up in a township in Bulawayo with everybody else. Doesn't matter what life I live now, I still am Virginia period. I will do. So it's until when we come together, recognizing ourselves as artists and not the class issue, it's also very important. We must do that. There are many, many good artists out there in these vulnerable communities, in rural areas, on the farms, informal settlements. But we hang out. It's also us artists, sometimes we create that. So let's try. I think Detroit, you've talked about it. I'm talking my experience. I come from Bulawayo. I'm not saying my community in Bulawayo is better, but I think people who know Bulawayo, they do know we are quite vibrant. I live in Harare since 1980. I'm a Hararian, but still I support home. I support Harare. I support anyone else. I support the continent and everyone beyond. So that's it. We have to be activists ourselves as actors to get somewhere. No one is going to do anything for us. It doesn't matter how old you are, because I'm an old timer. We're young coming up and we can work together.
I think just to agree with you in terms of the class issues, especially when you look at things like theatres, especially here in Harare, you find that for a long time there are certain theatres that were said this is the theatre for people on the so-called other side of Samora, and this is the theatre for the other side of Samora. And I think what has been incredible is that part of the work that we've been doing at Almas is that we have managed to actually work with artists from both sides. And there are connections that are actually being made. I should say, we're going to be just dealing with people from South or Sonoma, we're going to be dealing with all artists. And that has actually kind of helped even some artists who would never even approach places like Reps Theatre, would actually not even go to Reps Theatre because they always just think, oh, it's for white people and people from Borodale and Belgramian. And it's really incredible actually when you see the work that we've been doing with the artists at the Almas African Playwrights Conference, which is started on the 3rd of January. It's ending tomorrow with public stage readings that are starting today in the afternoon. And seeing just how people from across the divides are sitting in a room, working together, having real conversations about life, real conversations about art. And I actually think it's actually a rare moment for us to recognize the fact that there's something that can be done from that. There's some connection that we can actually make without actually, like we say, where we actually don't create divides, because art shouldn't divide. Art should bring people together, actually.
Sorry, can I ask you a question? Is it Almas is doing that because the founder is actually a person who's done this thing somewhere else and brought it home and insists that in their organization that she founded, those are the standards? Is that so?
Yes, that is so.
Yeah. So we have to then, if we have to copy, there's nothing wrong in copying. So maybe if there are any other practitioners in the field. Well, in the writing, I can't say much. We are in a disarray at the moment. We are trying the best that we can, but we are still writing. I just come from my editor right now. The next step is on the way.
Nice. Another comment or question? Yes.
Hi, I'm Sharon. I came a little late, so I'm not sure if you covered this. But I was wondering, Halima, what have you learned, seen, experienced in your time in Zimbabwe that you really want to take back with you to Europe?
Ooh, okay. So the first thing that comes to my mind is there are some things that people just kind of take as normal, but I'm like, oh, tell me more. So like this idea of negotiations for marriage, and I'm just like, I'm fascinated. I think it's amazing. And the idea that that this is a tradition that is still present in cities, and that the understanding that no two families are alike, right? And so that there's an intermediary that is able to fill this position of figuring out what's necessary, what's a custom, what's respect, what's, what are all of these intangible but very important things to bring families together. That's like the first thing that pops to my mind, because it's so different. But when I'm talking to people, a lot of people are like, yeah, that's, normal, right? Isn't that what we do? And of course the family is involved. It's not just two people, And, in America, the divorce rate is like super high. It's like the amount of people who stay married are, myself included, it's like, it's more people divorce than stay married, right? So, that's so fundamental though when we talk about like values and like foundation for like all of the things to be possible. Like what is the family structure, and what keeps that intact, and what transmits the values beyond, what we're getting from the broader world that is always trying to sell us things. But I mean, I've learned, I really am grateful, and I've learned a lot in being here. And I really also love, that even though like there is this large economic, situation. I mean, it's just like, right, it's some of the things that I've seen are like really huge. The way that people are responding is really empowering. And some people have, just said, hey, we rely on ourselves. We rely on our family. This is how we negotiate the fuel line, and this is how we are become, we're entrepreneurs, we're artists, and we're entrepreneurs, and we're out here making having our needs get met. I also love that Nzinga has made like so many friends, and people are so warm and loving on so many levels. And it's very different, and I really, just appreciate this whole experience. And I know I'm gonna be like, downloading more and more and more, but okay, last thing. And I find that, this whole like unlearning of colonialism and like reclaiming of what is traditional Zimbabwean, what is ancient knowledge, what is true value, that feels like very present. And I think on our side we have a lot more unlearning to do and disengaging with the larger structure, which pushes neocolonialism and which pushes us further and further and further away from our true selves. So just kind of a lot of like reaffirmations for being here.
Okay. Yeah. Any other comment or question? Yes.
What's your comment on general reflection in terms of how artists reflect themselves or what they offer to those guys who big back? Are you satisfied that those that have something that they offer are reflecting it as value for money to those that have big back, or it's whatever they have? And if so, what can be done?
Okay, that's a very good question. I'll try to answer it as adequately as possible. I think generally speaking, Zimbabwean artists really present a really good picture of themselves, especially people who are experienced, who have been practicing their craft for quite some time. And then in terms of presentation to the people with money, I'm afraid I don't know, because I'm not there when they're talking to the people with the big bags. But I think there's a certain perception in terms of, I think it's not just the art itself. There's a certain mindset that we have as Zimbabweans where we've constantly been more attracted to the exotic, to what is foreign. So if someone is coming in from outside, we're much more inclined to actually listen to them or to actually pay more attention to them. Despite the fact that maybe the person sitting next to me, the Zimbabwean, actually knows the same things that the person who's coming in from outside. So there's two ways in terms of perception, in terms of the fact that if it's local, it might not necessarily be good when it's actually good. And if it's actually coming from outside, there's always that perception that it's going to be fantastic and good, when sometimes it's actually not. So I think it's just constantly engaging with each other, the two sides, the people with the money, the artists. And I think for artists, conversations on money are not exactly things that we're very fond of. We're fond of talking about the work that we do, about the process, about the craft. The moment you talk about the money, it feels like a little bit of your soul is kind of fainting, dying, something. But just getting to a space where we can actually just connect and have conversation and have dialogue to say, how do we value what we have locally, even if we're also bringing people from outside, even if we're also matching in terms of quality, in terms of standard, in terms of skill, let's also value what we have locally, and it's also that idea of constantly investing in terms of the training processes themselves, constantly investing in terms of the actual production of the work, constantly investing in continued audience engagement or readership or art consumption, all those things. Then we can clearly get to a space where we truly value what we have. If we don't constantly have these critical conversations and constantly invest in all those three things, then it will be a matter of a person is highly skilled, but they're Zimbabwean, they will probably not get a job. Yeah.
And I would say, I want to just add, like, just a very small micro practice. You can come back up here. Just a very small thing is crediting. So, as Adrienne Marie Brown, an author and an artist in Detroit, she often talks about, like, whose imagination are we living in? And, with our imaginations and with our words, when we're talking to people, giving credit to our local artists and saying, as Zaza would say, or as Moffitt teaches us, or as the gallerist Donna Rivera has shown, we start placing that value on the folks that we know and lifting everyone's profile with just our heart and our words, and then more people start to hear and start to also attach more value onto what everyone is doing. I think that, again, the money thing is hard, because who knows what someone's intentions with that art is. Are they furnishing a hotel? Do they have, what are people looking for, right? And just trying to cater to a crowd can be so dead meat. So, I think, we have to do what we do, and we have to continue to find ways that we can always add value to it.
Any last comments or question?
I'll add one more question about people who work from outside. I know some of you might be very young, but there was a time when a South African film was being about South Africa before independence, the Dry White Season. The people came here from all over everywhere to make a film. And the local people at that time who were in the film industry, they benefited. They found employment, they were respected. We even had dinners and drinks with the local people and the international at the Sheraton at that time it was called. It was nice. I don't know what happened. Yeah, it was really togetherness. There were not only South Africans, but also Americans and other people from all over. And Zimbabweans felt very important in the film industry. They felt, but even the smallest part, or even hanging around or picking something, it was great. They were paid, they were treated well. I don't know what happened to that.
Maybe we lost our negotiating power.
The people change, okay, but we must never lose sight, especially the seniors. They must pass it on to the younger ones. I'm talking that most of the young people don't know that it happened, but we also are responsible for the rot as the elders, as the old ones, like the Hall of Fame doesn't exist anywhere else. I raised it up recently at some ministry or something. There is nothing like Hall of Fame. So maybe we can start in our own communities. Yes, that's what we saw here. And then maybe we'll get the idea. It's us. I must blame us as the also having come from there. We must tour the line, we must carry on, we must encourage, and we must have an open door policy that anyone can approach. Whether you live in a hall, or whether you live in a tree, or whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm here, Virginia, period. Let's talk, let's move. We're in the same game.
I have one last question for the two of you. Just to, how did this come about? Like, we didn't just randomly say, oh, Halima is here, so where's Zaza? What's the connection?
Okay, sure. Let's see. Was it 2 years ago?
Yeah,
2 years ago, ZCCD did a exchange, and I was hosting Free Market of Detroit swap meets around the city, and I thought it might be a great opportunity to send some of the written work and other items that are made in Detroit to Zimbabwe, and Zaza was the counterpart here. And so we did like an international long distance snail mail swap of written works and small items from artists on both sides. And actually Monday, and we've kind of, been Facebook friends and stuff, but Monday was actually our first time meeting. And we had the most beautiful conversation about, value and what our respective work is and how it looks. And so that's kind of the nutshell on my end.
Yeah, I think she's said everything. there isn't anything else I can add to that. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Halima. Thank you, Zaza. So our Mercy has straight readings today to round off their High Rise Conference at 2 and 6, and tomorrow at 2 and 6. And there's a free market at Njelele at what time, Dana? 3 till 6 tomorrow. All are welcome.